If you wish to be the king of the jungle, it's not enough to act like a king. You must be the king, and there can be no doubt, because doubt causes chaos in one's own demise.
Who's gonna carry the boat? No!
One of my favorite movies of all time is The Gentleman. At a time when it seemed like the culture was moving towards being overly politically correct, there was an unabashed style, charm, charisma in that movie, and yet it was all done with tact. Something that I couldn't help but think when I watched those opening frames of our hero, Mickey Pearson, walking into his favorite pub and ordering a pint and a pickled egg, was that this was the spitting image of a man who has arrived, a man who has actualized himself. Maybe he's a bit of a gangster, but he's a gangster with a heart of gold. And importantly, he's a man with tremendous competence. And indeed, I'm not claiming to be the spitting image of a 1% man. I think I'm not even close to being in the 1%. But I recently uploaded a video titled 90% of men are unattractive, and I wanted to reflect on the other end. What does it mean to be a man who has arrived at his full potential? What does it mean to be a 1% man? In this video, I want to cover 4 principles that capture my understanding about what it means to be a man at like the peak of his game. But before we get into the 4 principles, there is a principle 0 in this video. So the first principle, or what I'm titling principle 0, is this idea that high status is rented daily, and you have to honor the process of what it means to be high value every day. It's something you choose to do, but the beautiful thing is that it is a choice that anyone can make. I truly believe this. I realize now you don't necessarily have to have $1 million business or 6-pack abs. You don't have to look as juicy and bulky as Hamza necessarily to be high status in that day. High status is largely driven from your internal environment. It's a mindset. But when you look at someone who already has been a millionaire and someone who has a great physique, you should look at what they're doing, and then in your constitution, you should strive to put in as much work as them. Like these days, my confidence it's reached a new high. And I thought the success of my past, like when my channel first started growing, when I started making a really decent salary, both from my consulting job and from monetizing this YouTube channel, I thought those external factors would make me feel really competent, would make me feel really high status. And yet, I would have to admit that it was one of the least high status periods of my life, because deep down I knew between the hours of waking up and going to bed, I wasn't really living with a lot of focus and discipline. I wasn't living like a high status guy. It's just that like my past efforts had finally propelled me into a good future. But every day when you choose to do the best you can, you choose to work with the obstacles in front of you and like get after it that day, you can really feel that sentiment of being high status, this internal quiet confidence carry you, and it's a very powerful, savage feeling. To really drive this point home, in one of our podcast episodes, Thomas and I talked about the fact that if we ever see like a fat guy out running and really like sweating and busting his ass and getting those miles in, there was like this awesome Nike commercial back in the day of like an obese younger man like really putting the miles in on the pavement and running hard. Like, you don't think that person is low status. Just because they're fat, just because they don't have like a Greek god physique, you look at them and you're like, damn, that is a high status person. Their efforts, their drive, the fact that they are really endeavoring that day is something that anyone can respect. It's like something that my strength coach has said, or people in my powerlifting gym have, acknowledged. It's not necessarily the weight the person is moving. It's the effort and the strain you can see on their face that wins people's respect. And so this is principle 0, but it's an important point to like keep in mind. Regardless of where you are, I do think we can choose to be high status. So with that understanding, let's move on with the rest of the principles. Principle 1, be decisive, even if you don't feel sure about your goals. The process of being decisive, it's really about finishing things. And this is something that people who are entrepreneurs or who have creative projects that they are always pursuing, this is a problem that we all stumble across all the time, is that we are not decisive enough to finish things. It's like you start something and you finish it. All of the credit of doing something lies in the completion of that activity. I feel this so often with my coaching clients, where like we get on a call at the start of the month. We decide what one video is going to help them cascade their channel to the next level, like get a viral video. I'm like, listen, dude, put all of your efforts into this one video. It's the only one that matters. And then they start that script, but then they don't finish it in time, or like they're like, oh, actually, maybe I want to pursue this other idea. What was the point of all this planning and conversing if you did not finish? To be high status, maybe first and foremost, is to finish things that you endeavor to do. Finish workouts, finish games, finish filming sessions, finishing your drives, finishing reps, finishing plays, finishing the smallest task that is in front of you that you can sense is your duty to do. Just complete things and be decisive in the completion of things. And on the other end of this, be decisive even if you don't feel decisive. There are so many times now, I'll tell you, it's like in the last 6 months, I wake up and I don't actually know what the best way to conduct my day is. That's the problem of being an entrepreneur, is like when I had a boss, there was a real sense of security in the sense that my tasks were laid out in front of me. A lot of times you are not going to know what the optimal way to do something is. Like maybe like 60-70% of the time, I don't know the optimal way of doing something. A lot of times as like the CEO of your own business or your own life, you have to just pretend and hope that you're moving in the right direction and move confidently with whatever decision you make, because that confidence will give you feedback or results. This might be the pinnacle quality of a high status man. And what's really interesting about being a decisive person is that people flock to you. Like, it is an incredibly charismatic attribute. And this is not something that I've necessarily read in books. It's not like a research-driven principle that I came up with. It's often what I've observed and what I find attractive about other people. This is a defining attribute. Principle number 2, sex transmutation. Using the powers of meditation, visualization, and indeed seed retention to make yourself a high vibration person. Unfortunately, I wish I could be more science driven about it, but as someone who has been on and off practices like NoFap and the surrounding habits that make it possible, things like cold showers and meditation especially, it is a different plane of existence. In my own life and in my own experience, my ability to act on hunches and take appropriate decisive actions, to have more charisma, and a really important thing that manifests, my ability to maintain eye contact and just carry like a sense of pride in myself. It is very, very linked to basically my discipline around my sexual energy. When I'm on a good streak and when I have been like meditating, I like just make better decisions. It's not a conscious thing. It's just something that like every decision I make is 5% more effective. And then if I look at the week that I had, every 5% increase in efficacy with all of the choices I've made, it just feels more on point. And I have a much easier time feeling high status and implementing some of these other principles, like the surrounding principles that I've mentioned in the video thus far and will mention. It all becomes a lot easier with sexual transmutation. The cultivation of life force energy, all these years later, it still is something that makes me feel like a behemoth. And I would argue, if you haven't tried this, or if you haven't made great progress in it, like you haven't made it 30, 60, or 90 days, you should just do what it takes to get one of those longer streaks, because chances are you will feel differently. Elon Musk has referenced it just like in passing a little bit about how much energy people put into their sexual lives and how much progress they would make if they reharness that energy and put it into actual work, how much further they would get. Even Tim Ferriss, I believe he has a post that he made at some point. I forgot what the challenge was called. I think it's something like the Novos challenge, where he talked about how he did this experiment of not masturbating and not drinking alcohol for 30 days. And how he couldn't necessarily explain it, especially with the masturbation thing, but about how his productivity got so much better off of it. Principle number 3, fitness will kill your weakness. The greatest example of how fitness can change a person's life is that of Theodore Roosevelt. Basically, as a young kid, Theodore Roosevelt had asthma. He was very weak, very sickly. And one day, his father came into his room and delivered a message. He said, "Theodore, you have the mind, but you haven't got the body. I'm giving you the tools to make your body." Young Roosevelt proceeded to work out feverishly every day for the next 5 years, slowly building muscle and strengthening his upper body against his weak lungs and for the future. By his early 20s, it's been said that he essentially like beat the asthma out of himself. I don't know if that's true or if he just like ignored it for the rest of his life, but there was a moment where the doctor told him, you should just become like a professor, or you should just like study nature from textbooks because you were not meant to do these things in the field. And Roosevelt evidently just spit and just said like, I would rather be dead than essentially live like how you described to me. And then he just went on a long hike and like yelled poetry into the mountains. I mean, what that story basically tells me is that like, not everyone has to listen to their bad start in life. Not everyone has to listen to their genetics. And when it comes to making your body and living your life with activity and exercise, it will change your personality. If you are someone who goes from a sedentary lifestyle to becoming very active, paying a lot of attention to your nutrition and fitness, you cannot help but change your personality. And despite, in the past, there's been a lot of fun made about fitness bros, I would have to say that someone who takes their fitness seriously, it just makes you better because you have more brain-derived neurotrophic factor rolling around in your brain, literally increasing your dendritic connections, making you smarter, faster, sharper, makes you better looking, makes your skin look better. And a lot of what transfers over from the gym, just knowing that you put yourself through strain, you put yourself through effort and pain that most people just aren't going through. Like sometimes it hurts so bad, you like know, I'm not gonna feel this much suffering until like I'm on my deathbed. And I like put myself through that and I came out of that and I feel great. This morning I ran a 5-mile tempo run, for me a personal like PR, at a pace of 8:44 per mile. I felt really confident when that was over. It definitely changed my personality. And despite all that's been said about this, I will say it is a defining part of what will make you high status, internally high status. While I'm on this note, I'm going to take a quick pause here to talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. Magnesium Breakthrough is one of the few supplements that I've been taking for over a year now. It has dramatically impacted the quality of my sleep. And notably, their new reformulation, recently the folks at Bioptimizers have reformulated Magnesium Breakthrough to make it even more effective. There's 7 different kinds of magnesium in it so that it maximizes absorption. And I feel that what it's really helped me with is sleep latency. So your sleep latency is like the amount of time it takes before you fall asleep. If you set aside your bed only for sleeping, you fall asleep in a reasonable amount of time. The ideal amount of time that you're supposed to fall asleep in is 12 minutes. If you fall asleep sooner than that, it probably means you're underslept and under-recovered from the day prior. And if it takes longer than that, then it's just not optimal. And my sleep latency has gotten to such a great point, which is crazy because this is something I've been struggling with for so long. Like I would always have such a hard time falling asleep. And now that I've added Magnesium Breakthrough as part of my supplement stack, it's one of the last supplements I take in the day, my sleep has gotten so much better. And so my recovery and my workouts and my mental acuity as I approach the next morning, it's just so much more on point. So most supplements don't work, but there are a handful that are worth taking. Like magnesium is one that a solid % of the population is deficient in. It's like kind of hard to get naturally, and it's a huge component of what makes healthy testosterone production in men. So it's actually one that I would recommend checking out. If you use the link in my description box, which is magnesiumbreakthrough.com/Captain Sinbad, and use my code Sinbad10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off of your order of Magnesium Breakthrough. One of the few supplements I could not recommend enough. Thank you, Magnesium Breakthrough by Optimizers, for sponsoring this video. On with the rest of it. Principle number 4 sounds similar to the last one about how fitness will kill your weakness, but it's a little bit different. And this principle is train legs, not just physically, but also metaphorically. There's this book that I'd picked up at the airport years ago just because it looked funny. I was like a fan of the show Entourage back in college, and it's called The Gold Standard. In that book, one of his principles was talking about how you should have basically inspired evenings. Most of us, if we have jobs, we work 9 to 5, and by the time you're tapped out with your day job, it's like you don't really feel like doing anything in the evenings, even though you sort of know your evenings should be something, right? Like we have 16 hours in our waking days. We should like do something with the other 8 rather than just like watching Netflix, or at least mindlessly watching Netflix. And so this principle is called train legs, but what it means is do something inspired with your evenings. And the way Ari Gold said this is that he said, I go out most evenings. Like as a Hollywood agent, half my work is done at night. It's done over, well, strip clubs and getting cocktails with potential clients and going to gala events and film festivals and all these things. He's like, I'm in hotel lobbies, like having a drink, having meals. He's like, I go wherever the job takes me. And I gotta say, like, the job of your life, your life's work, both in romance, but also entrepreneurship and creativity and productivity and just staying inspired and staying excited, half of that job is done at night. And to not do useful things with your evenings, rather than just like mindlessly numb out on some TV show or video games or junk food, it's like not training legs. This is like the oldest meme in the lifting community. It's like, this guy probably does, he skips leg day, right? Skipping leg day is terrible because half your reserves of testosterone and muscle, like your legs, your quads, these are a huge area where you can build muscle. And there is a principle known as transferred strength, where when you build muscle in one area or you build strength in one area, it actually transfers to other parts. So theoretically, if my squat got better, that would translate to my bench press. Maybe part of this is because I'd have more like just core strength built up. My posterior chain might get stronger, but also I'd become just a higher testosterone person if I have stronger legs, which would just like produce more growth hormone, help my bench. I know I'm getting a little bro sciencey here, but I think the science is ultimately there. Train legs in life. Train your legs, both physically when you're at the gym. Don't skip leg day, but also don't skip the leg day of your life's work. Do something with your evenings that's inspired. I gotta do interesting stuff with my evenings that just like increases my skill, makes me a better person. Of course, one of those things is the running club that I joined up with. It has been an amazing mindset shift to run with people, to get better at something new. I've also just decided to sign up for like flight school. I'm gonna just get my pilot's license just as a way of having an inspired evening. For me, in this phase of my life, that is a form of training legs. And of course, you know, training legs, it could mean watching Netflix. I'm not knocking the Netflix shows. But when you watch a Netflix show or consume any form of content, really ask yourself, will this increase my enthusiasm and inspiration for life? Or is this just something I'm doing to pass the time? If you're doing it to pass the time, life is short enough. You can find something that is inspired leisure, that can actually like invigorate you to do the next thing. So I won't go on and on with this point, but train legs, all right? Train your legs, both physically and metaphorically.
Who is fucking my wife at a restaurant.
And the final principle here is from the words of Ari Gold himself, be fuckable. Some people, they come out of the womb looking like an Abercrombie model. Others like a descendant from the bloodline of Quasimodo. You look like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But regardless of your physical qualities, you should do everything you can to take pride in your appearance. To just know that like I am the best physical manifestation of myself. Now, I would never want to become like those like really self-absorbed fitness influencers who are just like only ever checking if they still have their six-pack abs. I think there is a limit on things, but you should generally feel like your attention to your physical form is attended to. Going back to the points of Napoleon Hill's book and his chapter on sex transmutation, he says you can tell if a man or a woman is highly sexed, like has a lot of refined sexual energy, because they take a lot of pride in their appearance. And leaving aside like incel philosophy and all this black pill like philosophy, and no matter who you are, whether you are like tall and handsome, naturally you've got great genetics, or you're short and bald, like you can choose to present yourself well. If you take some of these other attributes seriously, like being decisive, like taking your physical training seriously, it does help in making you fuckable. I'm trying to be fuckable to the universe, not just women, okay? You're trying to present and uncover the best version of yourself and put it on display for the world to judge, because the world is going to judge you regardless, right? I've gotten some comments on my recent videos where someone critiqued me and said, you know, this was a very vain thing you said, or it seems like the channel is moving in a more vain direction. And listen, I acknowledge the criticism of that. Like, I think ultimately, you know, we have a intellectual and a spiritual component to us that is very important, and the vanity metrics should not be driven too far. I would agree with that. But I think it's foolhardy to ignore the fact that the vanity metrics in today's society are more important than ever. People will judge you on your appearance more seriously than ever. And on the flip side of that, if you get your physical presentation on point, like I would say I've made solid improvements in my just presentation, like just the way I dress, the fact that I get more regular haircuts. I will say, in someone who has only started taking this seriously now, I get it's weird. It's like both men and women, they smile at me more. They make more eye contact with me. It's like they just treat me nicer because I present well, or at least present better than the past. And so this is an idea that I got from Ari Gold's book, but I don't think you can be high status unless you are fuckable. Now, once again, this is more of like a metaphorical point than like literal. To be fuckable, like, so that the universe receives you better, so that when you effort towards things, when you try to make connections, when you try to execute on your plans, the world responds to it. You don't just get ignored or shut down. And I think a lot of these other things actually affect your, I'm gonna get super demonetized on this one, fuckability. And so stay fuckable, train your damn legs, use fitness, be highly sexed by doing some of these high vibration activities like meditation, visualization, cold shower, nofap, and of course, stay decisive. Anyway, this is all conceptual. I am not in the 1%. This is what I feel are 1% attributes. So I'd love your thoughts on my take on this. And if you have any other attributes of a high status person, what are those attributes? I'd love to know. If you're new to this channel, my name is Nikhil. This channel is a combination of comedy sketches, lifestyle challenges, and more genuine videos like this one. If any of that appeals to you, consider subscribing. We also do have a podcast. I know a lot of people have been asking about it. It's just on a break right now. We're trying to figure out what to do with it. When I do bring it back, I might bring it back on a different channel. So just hold off on your concerns about the podcast. I also have a newsletter where I put out a weekly post on topics like these. My thoughts from the last week on entrepreneurship, cinematography, the tech I'm using. So I would love it if you would subscribe to that as well. But with that being said, for those of us who do the endeavors of staying high status, to us I say greatness is coming. We'll see you next time.